Welcome back to Metropolitan Pit Stop. Today we're going to talk about windows, more specifically rear windows and windshields. I'm going to show you some of the differences over the years, and then you can follow along as we install a rear window and windshield in this car right here. Now it may sound intimidating, especially when your local glass shop has told you that they don't want to touch it, but it's not really hard, it's just tedious and time consuming, and with the right tools, anybody can do it. I'll show you how. Also, if you have a different type of car, you can still follow along as the same general principles apply to most classic cars. This is an early model windshield. You can tell it apart from the later models by looking at two major differences. The lower corners are pretty sharp, just about 90 degrees. And also it has three pieces of trim, upper left, upper right, and one going right across the bottom. And you can see the clips that join each piece together at the lower corners and right in the center up at the top. This is the later model windshield. It began with chassis serial number E79088 and continued through the end of production. You can see that the lower corners are much more rounded, and it's got two pieces of trim, a left and a right, that are both joined together in the center. This is the earliest model rear window. It's three-piece, and the upper and vertical stainless steel moldings are 1/4 inch wide. The rubber for these early model windows is not reproduced, but we do have the stainless pieces to convert to the middle year style, which I'll show you next. This is the middle year rear window. It's also three-piece, but the vertical dividers and the upper piece are about 7/8 wide. This began chassis serial number 13620. And last but not least, we have the late model rear window. This began with chassis serial number E45672, and you can see it is just one piece. This is what we'll be installing today. We're going to get started with the windshield. Do yourself a favor and pick up some plastic or nylon trim tools from your local hardware store, auto parts store, Harbor Freight, etc. Those will definitely make it easier to not only install the rubber, but also to get the window in the car. So first we're going to put the rubber seal onto the glass. I like to start with one of the lower corners just to make sure that it's positioned correctly on the glass. Typically you can kind of roll it on, at least on the flat parts. Around the curves you might need one of those trim tools to kind of help guide it into place. Some people ask if they should use some sort of lubricant. I like to put it on dry because it will stay better. If you use a lubricant, it'll want to kind of peel off where you've already put it on, and then you'll be fighting with it. Go around the whole perimeter one more time and just make sure that the seal is pressed firmly into place. Now we're going to install the stainless trim. Now if you have the early trim, it's actually a lot easier. It just presses right into place. But with this later trim, you have to kind of sneak one side under the lip of the rubber and then hold it in place while you pull the other lip of the rubber over the flat part of the trim. And that's what keeps it in place. Here I'm using a screwdriver, being very careful. You may want to use one of the plastic trim tools for this so that you don't tear the rubber. So you can see how it looks when it's properly seated. Go ahead and continue around the rest of the window and get it all into place. To get the window into the car, you need something that will fit into the groove around the perimeter of the seal that you can use to pull the lip of the seal over the edge of the window opening, which will secure the window into place. Here I'm using 12 gauge wire. You can also use 1/4 inch nylon rope or cord that's really soft and flexible, that it's going to compress and not be so hard that it's going to tear your rubber when you pull it into the car. I like to use two pieces overlapping at the top and at the bottom, and then wrapping around the sides. You can use glass cleaner or some soapy water. That's what I'm using here. I've got a few drops of dish soap in a spray bottle of water, and you want to make sure and soak the whole perimeter of that window seal. It helps to have a couple people doing this, but I wanted to show that one person can do it. So what I'm doing here is holding the window in place with one hand and then pulling the cord up, starting from the bottom in the middle and then going up one side about halfway and then going up the other side about halfway, making sure everything's properly in place, and then just continuing up each side little by little and putting some pressure on the outside of the glass to hold it in place while it falls into position. And then keep pulling until you get all the way up to the top in the middle where the two pieces of wire are overlapping, and that should do it. Then you want to go inside, and you can see where the lip is supposed to be completely over the window opening, but in a couple spots it hasn't quite gone into place. Sometimes you can manipulate it just with your fingers. You can also use a trim tool to kind of help guide it into place. Go around the whole perimeter and make sure it's pressed all the way into place, all the way around the window. And that's how it should look when it's finished. And now we'll move on to the rear window. If you have a 3-piece window, it can seem intimidating, but if you take it one step at a time, it can easily be done. The first thing to do is make sure that your glass is positioned correctly. If you look at each piece, there's a logo etched at the top. For the center piece, it's near the top right, and on each corner piece, it's at the top near the inner corner. Then you want to attach all 3 pieces together so you can work with the window as one complete assembly. You can slide the rubber dividers onto the centerpiece and then slide each corner piece in. Use a few pieces of duct tape on the outside and on the inside to firmly hold the 2 pieces of glass together. It's best not to use any lubricant so that the seal doesn't slip off of the glass, but sometimes you need a little bit to help things along. Here I'm using some glass cleaner. It will dry and not be too slippery. When installing the center dividers, there is an inside and an outside. You can see there's a round profile and a flat profile. The flat profile goes on the inside, and the round profile goes on the outside, under the stainless trim. Moving forward from here, the installation process of the 3-piece and the 1-piece windows are exactly the same. First, make sure that your seal is positioned correctly. This flat piece with the 2 grooves in it is going to go on the outside along the top of the window. And if you flip it over, this part with the big flap is going to go on the inside along the bottom of the window. The longer part of the seal goes along the bottom of the glass and the shorter part along the top. Start at one corner and push the seal onto the edge of the glass. Sometimes using a trim tool will help make this job easier. As with the windshield, it's best not to use any lubricant so that the seal sticks firmly to the glass. It's best to install the upper stainless molding before putting the glass in the car. Position the glass how it will be installed in the car. Set the molding on top and make sure that it's completely centered, double checking that it's even on both sides, and use some duct tape to hold it in place. The seal has a flap molded into it that the molding will fit into. If you use your thumbs to roll the seal back a little bit and expose the flap, you can press the molding right into it and you'll feel it kind of pop into place. It's best to start on one of the corners and then continue down to one side, using a screw to secure the molding to one side of the rubber seal before working your way across to the other side, using some tape along the way to hold things in place, and finally using another screw on the other side to hold the molding securely to the assembly. I'm using some soft nylon rope to get the window into the car. I like to use two pieces, one across the top, one across the bottom, with the ends overlapping at each corner so you can pull the bottom first and then the top. Once the rope is fully inside the channel all the way around the window, spray the whole thing down with some soapy water to make sure that it will easily slide into place. It's best to use two helpers for this part of the process. Make sure that the ends of your rope are still in place on each side and that the lip around the bottom on the inside of the window is sitting inside of the window opening. Also make sure the corners are as far forward as possible. Start with the rope that goes around the bottom of the window. Pull from one side until you're about halfway around, and then pull from the other side until the bottom of the window is in place. Have your helpers put some firm pressure on the top of the window, keeping the most pressure right at the point where you're pulling the seal over the edge of the window opening, and pull up each side until you meet in the middle, and the window should fall into place. Once the window is in the car, you may find some spots where the seal hasn't fully seated. You can use this broad trim tool to push the seal so that it will seat better against the window opening. You can also use this flat tool to slide under the end of the seal and try to work it into place. It may take a few tries, and it may help leaving it out in the sun for a little while. Now we need to make some holes for the fasteners that hold on the lower pieces of trim. I don't like using a power drill around glass, so instead I use a sharpened metal rod. This is actually a pegboard hanger that I've straightened and sharpened. Gives you something to hang on to. And I heat it with a torch until it's red hot, and then you can go inside and poke holes from the inside out through the existing holes in the body, through the rubber, and that makes a perfect opening for the trim fasteners to fit through. If you need to open up the holes a bit more, you can use a drill bit in a pair of vice grips and just carefully spin that bit in there to open up the hole. After taking some steps to protect the paint, you can start installing the trim. Line up each fastener with its hole and slowly start pressing them in piece by piece. You're going to have to go back and forth a few times to make sure that it's all lining up nice and straight, and just slowly get it to where it's snug against the rubber seal. Before we get too far, we'll remove those two screws we installed earlier to hold the upper piece in place. At this point, you can use some tape to make sure that the trim doesn't come out of place. And then on the inside, we're going to install the nuts and go ahead and tighten those fasteners down, which will draw the trim all the way up against the rubber. You want them to be snug, but not so tight that they're going to deform the trim. Finish it off by installing the Y-clip on either side, and you're all done. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and comment below if you have any questions or if there's anything you'd like to see in future videos, and we'll see you next time.